Both of my parents were alcoholics, but in very different ways. My dad was the classic boozer, a drink in his hand the minute he walked through the door from work, and the life of the party in social situations. My mother was more reserved about her drinking. She typically drank late in the evening after everyone else had gone to bed, and she wasn't as flamboyant in social situations as my dad. In fact, one of my early memories is of my dad explaining to me that the thing he most liked about my mother when they first met was that she could match him drink for drink and still be, quote unquote, sober enough to drive him home at the end of the night. Now, sober in this case is the 1970s version of sober. I think referred solely to the physical symptoms of being drunk, not actual sobriety. So they put that in reference. Of course, being typically judgmental of my parents, as most children are, I found their alcohol abuse immensely distasteful and embarrassing. So you can imagine that I was quite relieved to find out as an adult that I just really don't like being drunk. I have a pretty high tolerance, so if I drink a little bit, it just makes me tired and cranky. And if I really want to get drunk, I have to put my mind to it, and it always ends up feeling like more of a chore, and it's not much fun. Now, in retrospect, it's pretty obvious to me that my sense of self-satisfaction with not being as weak-willed as my parents left me completely unable to see my own addiction taking root when I started abusing prescription pain pills in my early 30s. Now, I've been sober for 12 years now, but I am and know that I always will be an addict. I still dream about hoarding pills pretty much every week. And in moments of weakness and stress, I will catch myself drifting off into daydreams about using. But it is a part of my life story and actually not something that I've ever been ashamed of. The experience has taught me many, many things, especially when it comes to this week's topic. And that will lead us into episode 55 of the Valuability Podcast on the value of temperance. The Valuability Podcast is for anyone interested in financial planning, business, leadership, and personal development. Whether you are a financial professional, business owner, individual investor, or employee, we believe that financial success comes from creating a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will get you there. My name is Danforth Fleek. I am joined each week by Philip Simonson, my co-host, friend, and mentor. We have been in the financial services for 20 and 40 years, respectively, both as financial advisors and in a wide range of roles on the wholesale and retail sides of the business. Now, Philip, we've been starting out these values-based episodes with a definition of the value. So let's start out with temperance. And then I think there's a follow-up definition that we need that is included in that definition. So temperance is abstinence from alcoholic drink, but let's also define abstinence because I think that's probably a better concept for our discussion today. The fact or practice of restraining oneself from indulging in something, typically alcohol, although, as I mentioned, with my addiction was pain pills, and I think we're also going to talk about other forms of restraint, food and other forms of things.
Oh, there's food, there's gambling. You know, absolutely, Dan. And first, applaud you on your courage to talk about this. It is definitely a disease. It's see, people used to say, and I'd cringe. They say, well, they just don't have willpower. And I go, really? Hello? Have you seen a flaming alcoholic? I don't know about you, but I can't sit down and drink a whole fifth or a case of beer. I think that's willpower. Uh, so
Kind of the opposite direction, but
opposite.
commitment.
Right. It's self will run riot is what it is because it's all about me. Someone and it doesn't matter what type of addiction. It's a selfish disease and it's about me. But more importantly, bringing it back one step, Franklin, in these virtues, he's the 13. He started with temperance, and he says, look, you got to start there because around food and around drink, they're primal, and if you can't control those, then you're not going to have a clear mind and healthy body, which are the prerequisites in the pursuit of all these other virtues of life and values of life that we're talking about. So, um, you're right, Dan. And I think, just to harp on your point or back it and support it, it's just not drinking. Uh, I got some thoughts on eating with our society today and how many people are obese in America. It's very sad and it's alarming.
It's interesting. I've never really thought about it from that standpoint, but that is, Western thought often gets, I don't want to say dismissed but kind of slighted in relation to Eastern philosophies when people start understanding them, kind of Buddhism,
Mm,
Taoism, those kind of things, because of the fact that it doesn't always have connections between the physical and the emotional and the intellectual. And in this case, you're rightly pointing out that Franklin really did kind of have a instinct towards that
hmm
hey, this is starting on that primal human physical level of our base needs, the Maslow's
Right,
hierarchy.
right. And so you take food.
Probably one of the most abused things.
Right, and I'm,
Right.
64 years around the sun now, and uh, man, growing up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, it wasn't really till the fast food industry came about and all this processed foods. And when I was growing up, there was gardens and parents, did gardening, and you watched. Um what you put into your mouth. You didn't do it while watching TV, and there wasn't mindless eating. It was, and I would just share, and it's something I continuously watch. I mean, I'm right now 193. I'm got my goal this year is to get down to 180, and I've lost, I was 201 at the beginning of this year, so I had gained since. Uh, I did too much at Christmas time, and shame on me. And I lost, my self awareness and my discipline there, no question. But I would recommend if people just around the eating uh, addiction habit, you know, take time to eat around a dinner table. Take time to have conversations. Be mindful of what you're eating. Don't fill the plate. You actually, one technique: shrink your plate. Don't get the big plate size. Reduce your plate size. Go out and buy different plates, and try to eat by chewing 20 times and then putting down the fork between your next bite. By doing so, here's the benefits. One, you're getting all the nutrients out of the food so that can be processed in your body, and try to make sure as best you can. I know it's more expensive to buy whole foods and etc., but as much as you can, start paying attention to what that food is you're buying on the shelf, what those ingredients are. But it reduces the nutrients. It also helps in your digestive processing by by chewing it and breaking it down versus letting your gut try to do that. Big lumps of food. So then, lastly, I'll just say around food. And many of our listeners probably have heard this before, but uh, eat your breakfast like a king or queen. Eat your lunch like a prince or princess, and eat your meals like a pauper. And don't try to eat late. You and I lived on the road. You actually entertained. And we entertained a lot, so you didn't usually go out to eat till 8 o'clock. But you be careful when you're ordering that late at night, because you're just going to go sleep on that, and you're not going to get a healthy sleep because your system's trying to digest it all. So if you can, I would eat around 6 o'clock, and don't and then stop after that.
Well, I'll jump in and make a point there, especially for folks that are out doing the traveling thing, if that's part of your work experience. I got in the best shape of my life while being a traveling salesperson. So the idea that you can't do it is a fallacy.
Right.
It's harder, absolutely much harder. But here's the key thing that I learned: almost all of these decisions, especially in modern society, come down to similar to what I've described about my own anger process, of it being kind of the last domino in a whole series of things that lead you to being in a situation where you make a bad decision, right? So
Right.
very similar, in fact, to my anger process, right? Where I've told this in previous episodes, where I'm late, I'm running late, I'm hungry, I haven't eaten, I'm trying to get something done, and the dog doesn't behave, and so I'm swinging my foot at him with an armload of groceries, and he doesn't know what I'm doing because I don't want to take the time to set down the groceries to get him under control. And you just, there are these small mistakes that add up, and then all of a sudden my anger would snap. And this is very similar, right? It's, I'm on the road, my meetings run late, that it takes me longer to get to my hotel than I think, and all of a sudden it's 11 o'clock at night and you're pulling into Bellevue, Nebraska, and everything's closed except for a gas station and a McDonald's. And I would always say to newer wholesalers, at that moment, you're not going to make a good decision, right? Between a gas station and a McDonald's, there is no good decision. The other one is the
So
vending
you're saying
machine.
stupid is optional.
It is, but here's the difference between the decisions that you can make there. Don't make the tragic decision. The tragic decision is, screw it, 2 Big Macs, large fry, 48-ounce Coke, plop down in your room, stuff it all in your face, and pass out. That is the worst thing you can do, right? Now, a ham sandwich and a bag of potato chips from the gas station isn't great, but it's so much better than that. And that's what I would always say. Eating well on the road isn't endless parade of salads and you know things like that. It's just being conscious and not making the awful decision.
Well, all right. That's kind of the crux of our whole valuability, and it's first, like you said, it's around that decision making. What are your values? If one of your top values is health, well, then stop between the gas station and McDonald's and say, okay, let me just hmm, let's 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 recognize, what are my top values again? Hmm. Now, if you know it, because remember, decision making and to sustain optimal performance, if it's, self-will, self-discipline here, is comes down to talent, skills, and decision making. In this case, your decision making is 2 times more powerful in talent and skills when making this one. But you got to stop and press that pause for cause button, like you're saying, to become more self-aware and more conscious and lining those values to the goals. I love it.
Well, and I'm going to say as well that it also extends, as I've explained, with how cognitive behavior therapy has helped me with my anger,
Mm,
that now I can start to hijack that process when I start to
there.
see the, I'm hungry, I'm tired, it's late, I'm running late. I start to notice all of those things, and I start to put up warning flags to myself and say, hey, be careful here. You may be getting into a situation where your temper can pop up. Likewise, as I got better and better at realizing, hey, it's 7 o'clock, I'm leaving. I thought I was going to be leaving at 5, which means I'm not going to get to my hotel until 11. You know what? I'm just going to pop over to the grocery store across from the office where I just finished up, and I'm going to grab some hummus and pita bread and some
Mm,
carrots
mhm.
and a hard boiled egg, and like just taking it a step up in terms of then hijacking the situation and starting to become even more and more aware of things.
I would give acronyms. I'm a big acronym person.
What?
Right. So you just triggered one.
Number three, groups of three and acronyms. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm gonna try as a good coach or whatever. You shouldn't say I'm going to mention these three things. Well, let me see. I got two, and then I can't remember the third one. So,
Right.
right. So never say how many there are. So I'm not going to say three, but I will tell. Here's the acronym. I'll say it's four. I think I got it this time. It's called HALT, and this acronym is you want to become conscious or self-aware of this acronym because these are the triggers that get people to fall off the rails. And whatever they're trying to be self-disciplined about. In this case, we're talking about drink, we're talking about alcohol, we're talking about gambling, whatever those addictions. But HALT is be careful when you're hungry. 2, angry. 3, loneliness. T, when you're tired. So if and this you and I've talked about this, look, this self-awareness and that's knowing what are the things that trigger you, and then listen to that self-talk 6 inches between your ears. If you can become more self-aware, then you're going to be better at making decisions, and if you're better at making decisions, then you're going to be better at leading not just yourself, but then you can lead others even better.
Well, I think that's a great point to transition into talking a little bit about how this applies directly in the business world.
Mm.
And, you know, especially whether you're an employee or you're a leader or you're, most importantly to an organization, an executive, understanding the role of temperance in the business environment, regardless of what you do on your own time, right? This week, for those of you that follow sports and ESPN, Paul Pierce, uh, basketball, former pro basketball player, got fired for posting a video of him partying when he was off duty, but he posted the video, and now they ended up firing him because not because of the video, but because he took the video and chose to post it, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But hey, what happens on your own time is your own time, right? It's your personal life. You can do whatever you want on your own time, but understand that even as an employee, when you come into work, your persona is having ramifications. This is something you taught me early on. I had a very kind of both middle fingers up to the establishment attitude, and you pulled me aside early on and said, "Hey, look, you're young, so I get this, but you also need to realize that you have a role of leadership, that people are looking at you and watching how you act, and that sends cues to them about how strong this company is,
Well, they're going
where
to
we're
model the
headed."
leader,
Right.
right?
And so you just need to be aware of it, and that doesn't mean you were very, very certain to say, "Hey, your personality is great. I don't want your personality to change. I just want you to be mindful
Hmm.
of what it looks like." And so that really is the key, one of the keys with temperance, at least in the business area, is that being the non-drinker, it, I'll tell you, none of it looks good. I've seen it all, right? I've seen the lowest member on the team, wasted and flopping around at a party, and I've seen the head of the entire corporation, 1,000 people corporations flopping around drunk, and it's a bad look no
Well,
matter what.
Christmas parties are
That's the big
bad,
one.
right?
That's the
So
big
let's
one.
just talk, about that for a little bit, and I'll segue to you, but I want to tell a story. Um, my father, who he back, I think I've shared before, CC camp dirty 30s, born 1918. Didn't make, he had to go to CC camp, send home $25, kept five, then went off to World War II, came back, never finished high school, worked with Ma Bell, started climbing telephone poles, got into management. So but he had great sage advice. So one of the things he said, taught me, he says, look, if you're going to go into management and leadership, remember this: when you have these parties, here's a couple things I want you to remember. Just have a couple drinks with your people. Then get out of there. They need to, I'm sure he picked this up as an officer. He ended up being a sergeant, but, without going to officers training school, had risen to as high as he probably could go in the Air Force then. But, they learned, hey, you let your people blow off steam. You don't need to be there. Have a couple drinks, appreciate, show your appreciation, but then get out. And he used to have to, even as a civvy or a civilian, he worked at the Air Force Base, NORAD. We the officers club. There's protocols. You don't, you tell, they'd have to put on their dicky bows and their DJs, that's dinner jackets, and and the officers would be dressed in their blues or their whites, depending on the season. And like you said, and we even at our table, you didn't sit till the head officer sat. That's when, so there was protocols, and you had to mind your P's and Q's. But then I'll tell you, also, if you're a leader and you have independent contractors, even if you don't have independent contractors, but if you're making an override off of them, or if your employee, you're making money off them, it's good to let them get in your back pocketbook. So I'm going to share that. Those are some of my couple things.
Yeah, to that point, the story of my mom and dad meeting, my dad fell off his bar stool at the officers club at the Navy base in Newport News, Virginia, in front of my mother and her friend. My mom's second husband had died in a helicopter crash. He was a Navy helicopter pilot. And so this was about 6 months after he had died. First time she went out with her friend, who was another officer's wife. And they went to the officers club, and here my dad flops on the floor in front of her and gets up and asks her out. And she says, "What are you doing in here? You can't possibly be an officer. Officers don't act like you." So she made him show her his military ID to prove that he was a lieutenant. So might give you a little bit of an idea of where some of my
it might have been the first warning sign to your
right?
mom, but if you said your mom, right, if she was an
She was a
alcoholic,
party girl.
party
She was
girl,
a party girl too. She loved the social stuff. She just acted very differently.
yeah,
My
right.
mom was the elegant, never show it, never, but she was, like, as I
Oh yeah,
said, she was right there along with it. And of course, also the drinking late at night by yourself is the thing that I
oh,
always pointed
absolutely,
to as the, like, that's the one where I always knew I'd wake up in the morning as a kid and I could smell the cigarette smoke in the kitchen, and I knew if she was smoking, she was drinking, because she couldn't smoke without drinking. And so she
yeah.
would sit up late at night and drink and smoke. And so I always knew when she was stressed, because I'd get up and as I was eating my breakfast, I'd smell smoke in the kitchen. No, looking back now as an adult, and you think, man, where did I get some of my personality traits from? And I, I want to believe that I got most of them from my mom, but there's definitely a little bit of my dad in me.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We are nurture nature. I think it's a combination, and you just know this if you know if you can't be self-disciplined with it, because then you got to really take a close look. Because if that old saying, one is too many, thousands not enough, um, might might be a sign that you could have a problem here. Uh, if your drinking is causing harm to yourself, your employees, or your family, then you might have a problem too. Um,
Well, and from my own personal experience, looking back, in the moment, you always feel as if you're getting away with it, right? So one of my
Cunning, baffling, powerful disease. You think you're pretty smart, but
right, yeah, my one of my current clients was one of my employees, person I was managing at the time that I was in the depths of my addiction, and so now that I talk about it openly, he will point out things like, "Yeah, no, I could tell that you were wearing eye makeup because the bags under your eyes were
mm,
so big." And stuff like that that you thought, "Oh, I was just skating through and nobody noticed." And the other side of that is that, like, I know looking back that my work quality was
oh yeah.
not up to par, right? That I was avoiding things, I was avoiding meetings, and so it you know everything, we've gotten better at balancing work and home life,
Hmm.
but with this, and also I have to say my experiences with corporations, at least the ones that I worked for, as it relates to addiction, were also very good. So
Oh,
many corporations have gotten much better about offering things. I ended up dealing with it on my own,
right.
but when I went on to other organizations, I often shared that as a part of my story, and they were very good about, hey, if that's ever an issue, you let us know, we have resources for you. And so, oh, also I think a lot of the things that, you know in past years would make dealing with this in business situations more challenging, has gotten better, at least in the larger corporate world. And that I
Oh,
would say to
oh, certainly.
people who are, small business owners, running smaller organizations, to really take note of that. And obviously you don't always have the resources, but being as responsive as you can, given your resources,
I
is a huge thing. And again, then shows other people that, hey, as an organization, we care about our employees.
absolutely, absolutely. Look, we've said this many times as well. We're all perfectly imperfect. This is a self-indulgence, or the addictions of many, so there's many forms of them. It's a disease. It's been proven. Um, so you got to seek help, and get the help that is needed, and really get the new tools that you can strap onto your tool belt every morning, so you can get better coping skills. Because it's selfishness or self-centeredness is caused by forms of fear, and that at this fear or self-delusion or self-seeking, self-pity, those are all the things that people make up justification for why they're doing what they're doing. So I would you raise a great point. you know I think that's a healthy organization where they're willing to take and look and help their employees deal with these severe health issues. And it's not the you get the tools. It's not none of us can go back and rewrite our beginnings, but we all get to write our own endings. And that's what we got to work on. And we'll probably hit some hiccups along the way, but that's okay too, as long as um, you don't go into hiding about them. I mean, um, hey, here's what happened. I had a slip. Here's what I'm going to do differently. I can live with that. Um, I don't know how many my addiction was tobacco. I mean, I smoked 2, 3 packs a day. When I lived in England, you could still smoke, and even you know kind of joke, what's power if you don't use it? I'd smoke, and I was inconsiderate. If I wanted to light up, I'd light up in a in a meeting, etc. Uh, Not healthy. I hid those things when I was trying to quit, and that's a good sign.
I saw a lot of that. I was
Oh yeah,
often the accomplice.
yeah. You'd go out with me. I'd bet Nate. Okay, I will. $1,000. Well, okay, there went 1,000. I didn't make that bet. Uh, but you play all those games.
It's true. It's true. Well, and smoking, because I still vape. I chewed tobacco. I used cigarettes. And it's the one that when you go into opiate rehab, they kind of set that aside and say, whatever with the cigarettes, focus on the addiction to pain pills because this is going to ruin your life. And so they kind of give you a pass. It's kind of the joke at the AA or NA meeting is everyone takes a break and goes outside and smokes 5 cigarettes in the middle of the meeting and comes back in. Everyone's pounding coffee and
Oh,
smoking
well, they
cigarettes,
all they all had there's right, coffee's the caffeine, the
gum, like
nicotine.
everything. Yeah, right.
Well, you like the sweets because that's what you is the absence of alcohol. Because you break down alcohol, turns into
Sugar. Yeah,
sugar. So, and then usually someone they say, "Well, he's depressed." Well, hello, yeah. Been what do you think alcohol is? It's a depressant. So, before you get assessed that you're depressed, give it up for 6 months and see how you're gonna feel. But you gotta flush it out of your body.
well, and I think it's probably a good place to kind of wrap up this new
Sure.
first section and transition. I'll tell the story of when someone approached me about going into rehab. And so it was a very good friend of mine. Actually, him, Adam.
Mm,
Talked to my, at the time, girlfriend. And was she my girlfriend at the time? No, we were just friends at that point. We had broken up years before, actually. So she was just a friend, but my ex-girlfriend. And they approached me one night. We had a poker night, and I would go off into my room and get high. And so while I was in there hiding out, they came in and sat down. They said, "Hey, we've been talking and we're concerned about you. We were thinking about doing an intervention, but we all discussed it and decided that if we tried that you'd probably just kill us all." And I kind of chuckled and said, "Well, yeah, you're probably right. I probably wouldn't take that super well."
no.
And so, yeah, we decided that we were just going to come and ask you if you'd think about going into rehab. And I said, "Well, actually, I have been thinking about it, and I actually had already come up with a list of things that I had to have in order. I'd just gotten a new job, and I couldn't lose that job. And I mean, I could, but I'd worked really hard to get it, and I didn't want to lose it. And I also didn't want to start with them and then say, 'Surprise, I'm an addict. I'm going to go into rehab for a month.'" So one of my requirements was that it had to be outpatient. And but I set up a list of things, and then my ex-girlfriend went and found a place for me to go. But what I will say, kind of its final note there, is while it fit the kind of tactical things that I needed, I could go
Mhm.
weekly. I was outpatient, number of things about it that worked for me. From a personality fit, it wasn't a great fit for me.
Right.
And it I was there for about a year and a half, and then eventually I ended up finding another doctor that was a better fit. And my point of telling this is to say, whatever it is that you're addicted to, there are a ton of different styles of people out there to help you, and no one style is absolutely right. And you at one point took me to an AA meeting, I think,
Mhm.
and that just didn't work for me. I didn't like that kind of atmosphere. I didn't like the public nature of it. It just wasn't my scene. And many times when you're facing that, someone will offer something to you and you're like, no, that doesn't work for me. And then you think that's all like that, right?
Right.
There's numerous styles out there. Find the one that works for you at the time, and then also understand that as things change in your life, that may change as well. Like you may
Well,
need to move on to a new one.
I'm going to put one caveat to that. And I mean, this whole temperance, and it's about self discipline. And I applaud you first and foremost for sharing your story and citing what you just did. There are many different ways to get, you know, back on making healthy choices, um, and taking care of yourself. And the the meeting, like, is open meetings. There's open AA meetings, and you can see when they're, when you look them up, if it says open, that means anyone can come. And and I went to Al-Anon for 10 years, and straight. It was Tuesday night. It was best. I look forward to it, for $1.
You have a bunch of friends still
Oh,
from,
still, we
yeah.
still, for $1, we still meet. Well, but $1, I mean, but now it's like Zoom and my men's group. But they, you cry, you laugh, and you realize it's not, you're just dealing with life's problems and life's issues, and you get a group of people to share them with, and that can be good for some and not good for others. So you got to find out. But my point here is, give it whatever it is, at least six. Give it 6 goes before you make your decision, because you're going through. First of all, applaud anyone for their courage of stepping through that door for the first time. That's the first step's the hardest. As they say, that the first uh, step of travel 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Well, just got to get to the first step, and that's. I loved your friends, and this is my last bit. They approached you with, I'd call that, intervention with love, and all you're doing is hoping with, in love. What does love stand for? Letting others voluntarily evolve. So they let you figure out what you needed, and then you owned it. But at least
Yeah.
they had the courage to, because they really are saying they care and they love you. But
Yep.
by saying nothing is just letting that person have a train wreck. Because if you don't, if you don't break this thing, you really got two options. You're either going to die or you're going to end up in jail. That's
Well, and it's a really great point. I think it is a great place for us to wrap this up. That
cool.
at the point that you reached out to me, I was not ready. I just
No.
wasn't ready. So it wasn't even really that I didn't like that format. I just wasn't ready. I wasn't even thinking about it. I still had it all under control. I was still like, hey, if I get a job where I can make plenty of money, I can afford all of this. And that's the final thing that is really funny, right? In the end, none of it was the social stuff. It was the fact that I had gone $70,000 in debt and I
Ooh.
wasn't making enough money. And so
And
my
you were
financial
making
brain,
buku.
well, this was before. This was
Oh,
just right before I got my first wholesaling gig. It was
oh,
the first wholesaling gig was when they approached me.
yeah.
And
I get
I
it now. That was
it
one of your
just
recommendation
wasn't,
criteria.
luckily, I say it for wholesaling really did save my life, honestly, because had I gotten that job earlier and started making really good money, I would have just kept going until I fried myself out, because I just couldn't make it work financially. And my brain, I, well, if I declare bankruptcy, my licenses are jeopardized and then I can't work. And literally, that's what started me stepping back from the precipice.
Mm.
Had nothing to do with the social stuff. I still thought that I could do it. I still thought that I could manage it. Now looking back, of course, I know I was totally nuts on that. Like,
That's the
just
self-delusional bit. Mm.
so delusional. But there was just that glimmer of logic that I cannot go $150,000 in debt. This is not going to work. I've got to stop this and start retreating, or my life's going to collapse. And so, kind of interestingly, it was business that saved me, my business mind. So Well, let's wrap up our main section for the week, and I want to thank you as well on sharing the things that you've shared, and for also, I mean, being the first one. You really were the first one that tried to reach out to me back in the day. So,
Well, appreciate you,
but as I
partner.
said in the intro, I've just never even thought to really not be open about it. Like it just is what it is. You know, if it's going to come up at some point. So I just always figure if you're not going to like me or you're not going to want me to work for you because of that you should know now. Right.
Their loss.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
So, but the other side of that is I have to say, I, like my last big corporate job, I told them as soon as they offered me the job,
Yeah, I
I was
remember that.
I told him, and he was just like, "Yeah." So, like, they just there was not even a flicker of concern about it. So that's what I would say to anybody out there. If you are struggling there, it's likely a lot better than you think in terms of how people will react to it. But let's move on to our article review for the week. I thought this was a really interesting article for us, especially with kind of the things that we talk about. Questioning an investment recommendation roots out bias, study says. Essentially, this was actually, I think, a study done based around accounting recommendations, but they really kind of took it out of the financial realm entirely and based it around recommendation of YouTube videos. So basically the setup was that they had advisees and then people that were and advisors, and the advisors were recommending YouTube videos that the advisees could invest in, quote unquote, and then they would make money based off of the number of clicks. So the advisees would make money based on the clicks, but the advisors
Mm.
were getting paid commissions to promote certain videos over others. And so the setup of that was, basically setting up kind of the classic conflict of interest, right? That, hey, I'm getting paid to recommend something versus other things. And the really interesting part of it was the second portion. No shock, people convinced themselves that recommending the ones that paid them was the best choice, right? Like the first part of the first part of it was shock. If you're paying commissions, people convince themselves that that's the right choice, right? And so that's what the first section figured out. The second section was really the more interesting side, actually, and it was that if the advisees, if the end clients were given responses to kind of a vague question about the process that the advisor was using, and then a fact-based question
Right.
that
Help root out the cause of the bias, right?
yeah, the bias was really much more exposed through the fact-based question being asked. And so the kind of concrete evidence of this is that, and actually towards the end, I caught this, and I'm not sure if you caught it as well, Sai. They also pointed out how advisors can use it to root out bias of the people offering them
Hmm.
investments. They kind of
Correct.
turned it on its ear a little bit and said, as advisors, if that wholesaler comes in, you ask them fact-based questions about their products, and that should root out their biases. And but also I thought very, very interesting from the standpoint of thinking about how an advisor could actually build this into their own business with clients to say, hey, we're going to get together. I want you to have a list of questions you have for me. I know you do that at a certain point during the
Hmm.
in teaching the advisor process of, hey, I want you to come armed with questions, and that, even if the clients didn't know that, would be a tool for advisors to work on rooting out their own biases.
Right. Because we're, again, emotional creatures first. So then we're going to seek out whatever our opinions are and our be ingrained in behaviors, those things that mirror up with them versus stepping back and using, like you had described, the fact-based questions. So I think it's a great study. I'm glad you shared it with the people. Um, it all comes down to back again to decision making, and we are where we are because of the decisions we've made, and I can't stress enough. I learned from my mentor Doug Lennox, when making particular financial decisions, first of all, figure out what your values are, align your goals to those values, and then step back and ask the right questions. And that'll help you make good decisions, and they better be in alignment. That's your decisions to those things that are important to you, your values and your goals.
Obviously, we have come a long way since I started out in the business, even in the mid 90s, towards kind of systematically removing conflicts of interest and situations where, recommending certain things are better for the advisor versus better for the client. But I think we still have work to do in terms
Oh,
of, pushing ourselves to say, even getting down into the level of your own. I remember being when your partner trained me in on asset allocation. Like at that point, high yield bonds had just gotten absolutely destroyed, right, in the early 90s. And he just was, nope, you don't even put high yield bonds into an asset allocation. Like you just cut them out, like just literally uncheck the box, don't include them. Why? Because it's a difficult conversation to have, right? Like
mm-hmm.
people didn't want to talk about high yield bonds because they'd gotten massacred.
Oh,
Well,
particularly the high yield and the junk bonds, milk,
sure,
and
sure.
so.
Well, again, absolutely reasons why it was a hard conversation to have. But there also have been periods since then where the high
Oh,
yield asset class has done just fine. And it also kind of submarines the whole concept of asset
right,
allocation if you start
right.
picking and choosing.
I'm not exactly right, and that's a subject for a different matter. But you are so right, and it's it's fact-based questions. Besides your values, besides your goals, what's your time horizon? Let's look at your tax situation. Let's look at your risk tolerance. Do you want growth? Or do you want? Do you need yield? Um, we have to look at all those things before we can come up with good decisions on our recommendations. So
Right.
try to get the emotions out of it and be careful. Watch it. Put yourself in check. Uh, if you're paid a commission, uh, we used to always joke. Belcor, which is a real estate limited partnership, was the cure all to all, because I think it used to pay out like 35. Initially it was $50 per thousand, and it went to 35. Not good. Not good.
Well, I used to always call variable universal life insurance the Swiss Army knife of financial
Yeah,
planning, right? For
that's
some
another one.
advisors, right? Hey, it's a retirement plan. It's a college funding plan. It's life insurance. Like, well, wait a second. What is it? It's my commission. Oh, there we
Follow the money. Follow the money. That has not
Right,
changed.
right. Well, that is going to round things out for this week. If you have topics that you would like us to cover in upcoming episodes or questions for us, reach out to us on our email, info@value-ability.com. Again, that's info@value-ability.com. Or you can reach us through social media. Our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook links are all at value-ability.com. under the Contact Us tab. Wherever you find your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music, you can find us there. We also have a YouTube channel. Search Value-Ability on YouTube to find us there. Or you can find us on our website, value-ability.com, under the Episodes tab. Wherever you find us, please like, review, subscribe, and share. Next episode, we are taking the next of Ben Franklin's 12 values and doing the value of silence. I'm not sure about this one. Two guys like the sound of their own voice a whole lot, talking on a podcast about silence. So we will find a way to get through that. Check back next week, and we will be here for you. As always, thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next week. And remember that financial success comes from creating a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will get you there. This is a podcast collaboration, not a peer-reviewed journal or a sponsored publication. We make no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this podcast, and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information, or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. It is the listener's responsibility to verify their own facts. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on this podcast. Strategies or investments discussed may fluctuate in price or value. Investors may get back less than invested. Investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast. Before acting on information on this podcast, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular circumstances, and strongly consider seeking advice from your own financial or investment advisor. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Assumptions are not reflective of the position of any entity other than the authors, and since we are critically thinking human beings, these views are always subject to change, revision, and rethinking at any time. Please do not hold us to them in perpetuity.